My fiancé Alex and I had been together since college, and we were planning our wedding, which was just 5 weeks away. At 28 years old, I felt like I had found the person I was meant to be with. We shared a lot of history, values, and dreams. We had been through ups and downs just like any couple, but we were solid, or so I thought. Alex's circle of friends had always been a big part of his life, especially his best friend since childhood, Danny. Danny was 28, the same age as Alex, and they had been inseparable since they were 4 years old. She was like a sister to him, and she was very much part of the friend group that also included Marcus and Daniel, who had been friends with Alex and Danny for nearly as long. Danny was an interesting person. She was gay, openly so since we met, and she presented herself in a way that was more aligned with being one of the boys. She had short hair, wore jeans and t-shirts, and despite being a tall, lean woman, she preferred a more laid-back, masculine style. We all got along well, and I never felt like Danny crossed any boundaries in her friendship with Alex. If anything, I trusted her more than anyone else in his life. When the time came for Alex's bachelor party, I wasn't worried. I trusted him completely. The group planned a weekend trip to a coastal town known for its scenic views and adventurous activities like scuba diving and kayaking. It was also known for hosting bachelor and bachelorette parties, but without the typical strip club culture that often came with those events. They stayed in an Airbnb, and the itineraries sounded harmless enough. Some adventure activities during the day, a nice dinner, and a night out at a club. What could go wrong? I wasn't prepared for the phone call I received early the next morning. It was Marcus, one of Alex's friends, and the urgency in his voice had my heart racing before he even said a word. "Hey, I need to talk to you," he started, his tone grimmed. It was 7 a.m., and I was still groggy, but I could tell something terrible had happened. Marcus came over to my apartment right away. When he arrived, he looked more distraught than I'd ever seen him. Without sitting down, he began telling me the story that shattered my world. After returning from the nightclub on the second night, the group continued drinking at the Airbnb. Daniel and Marcus, both single, had brought back two women from the club, and they had retired to their respective rooms. The rest of the group, including Alex, Danny, and another friend named Jeb, stayed in the living room, still partying. The drinking escalated, and things got out of control. What Marcus described next made my skin crawl. Apparently, Jeb and the other friends started complaining that they didn't get to go to a strip club and were upset they hadn't seen any TA during the night. They were drunk, and their frustration turned into something more sinister. They joked that since they hadn't seen any strippers, Danny should strip for them. At first, it seemed like a ridiculous joke. After all, Danny was their friend, and she was openly gay. But the laughter quickly turned into something uglier. Jeb and the friend egged each other on, and, shockingly, Alex joined in. They thought it would be funny to strip Danny against her will. Marcus told me that Danny was screaming for them to stop, but the men ignored her pleas. They physically restrained her and stripped her while she fought back, humiliated and terrified. Thankfully, Marcus and Daniel, who were in their rooms with the two girls, heard the commotion and came to Danny's rescue. They pulled the three men off her and took Danny into one of the bedrooms with the girls to protect her. Marcus said that Danny was hysterical, crying and shaking, unable to comprehend how her lifelong friend, Alex, had been part of this. Daniel wanted to take her to the police right away, but Danny refused. She was too scared, too embarrassed. She couldn't believe this had happened, and she was afraid of what would happen next. Marcus and Daniel decided to take her to her parents' house, which was an hour away, to make sure she was safe. Marcus told me he was furious with Alex. He said he was done with him and would support Danny if she decided to press charges. Before he left, Marcus looked at me with pity in his eyes and said, "I'm sorry you had to hear this, but you need to know." When Alex returned home later that day, around 3 p.m., I was still in shock from what Marcus had told me. I didn't know how to process it, and I wasn't sure if I could even look at Alex without feeling sick. But when he walked in, he acted like everything was normal. He greeted me with a smile, completely unaware that I already knew what had happened. As soon as I told him that Marcus had come over that morning, his demeanor changed. He became nervous, his eyes darting around the room like he was looking for a way out. He tried to play down what had happened, describing it as a joke that got out of hand. But I wasn't buying it. I had heard the truth from Marcus, and I knew there was no excusing what he had done. I confronted him about what they had done to Danny, and that's when he really started to panic. He admitted that it was wrong, but he kept insisting that it was a prank and that they had all been drunk. He even had the audacity to suggest that Danny was overreacting and that she should just let it go. I told Alex that Danny might be going to the police, and his face turned ashen. He looked terrified, like he knew he was in deep trouble. He begged me to let him talk to her, but I told him that she wasn't at her apartment. She was too afraid to go back there, fearing that Alex or his friends might show up. At that moment, I knew our relationship was over. I didn't care about the wedding, the plans, or the years we had spent together. The man standing in front of me wasn't someone I recognized. He wasn't the man I thought I was going to marry. I asked Alex to leave. He refused at first, but I insisted. Eventually, he left, crying and pleading with me to forgive him, but I couldn't. I was done. As soon as he was gone, I sat down and tried to process everything. My mind was spinning, and I didn't know where to start. The wedding was just 5 weeks away, and now I had to cancel everything. But that seemed trivial compared to what Danny had gone through. How could Alex do something so cruel to his best friend since childhood? The first thing I did after Alex left was reach out to my parents. They were heartbroken for me, but immediately sprang into action. My brother came over with a friend, and together they packed up all of Alex's belongings and took them to his parents' house. When they arrived, Alex's father asked if this meant the engagement was off. My brother simply told him, "Yes, and what did you expect?" Alex's father didn't argue. He just told my brother to let me know that I should contact them about canceling the wedding. But I wasn't going to contact them. I didn't want anything to do with Alex or his family ever again. My parents were handling the cancellation of the wedding, and my cousin, who is a lawyer, offered to help me disentangle myself from Alex financially. My brother had already advised me to transfer all my money out of our joint accounts, which I did, but there was still a lot to sort through. The hardest part was knowing that Danny was suffering. I tried calling her, but she wasn't ready to talk. I sent her a text telling her that I had broken up with Alex and that I was there for her if she needed anything. She didn't reply, and I didn't expect her to. I knew she was dealing with her own trauma, and I didn't want to add to her burden. Marcus and I stayed in contact, and he kept me updated on Danny's condition. She was still too scared to go to the police, but Marcus was determined to convince her. He told me that there were 2 videos of the incident, one recorded by Jeb and the other by one of the girls who had been in the house. He also mentioned that the owners of the Airbnb had gotten involved after seeing footage from the house's security cameras. The more I heard, the worse it got. Marcus confessed that Alex hadn't just been a bystander. He had been actively involved in pulling off Danny's clothes. He hadn't assaulted her physically like the others, but he had stood by and done nothing to help her while she screamed for them to stop. Marcus also mentioned that Alex might have been on drugs that night, which would explain some of his behavior, but that didn't excuse what he had done today. As the days went on, I found myself becoming increasingly angry, not just at Alex, but at Marcus as well. I didn't understand why he hadn't told me everything from the beginning. He had told me about the assault, but he hadn't told me about Alex's cheating or the full extent of what had happened that night. Danny later confided in me that the night before the assault, she had caught Alex and his two friends having sex with escorts in the living room of the Airbnb. When she walked in on them, Jeb had yelled at her to leave, telling her that they were paying for the experience and she was ruining it. Danny had been horrified, but she hadn't told me because Marcus convinced her to stay for another night. When I found out about the cheating, I was devastated all over again. Alex had betrayed me in more ways than one, and Marcus had known about it and kept it from me. I felt like I had been lied to by everyone I trusted. At that point, I didn't know who I could trust anymore. Daniel had been my rock throughout the whole ordeal, but even he hadn't known the full extent of what had happened that weekend. I knew Marcus was dealing with his own guilt, but that didn't make it any easier for me to forgive him. By the time Danny went to the police, I had already blocked Alex from contacting me. I didn't want to hear any more of his excuses, and I certainly didn't want to listen to him try to justify his actions. I had made up my mind. I was done with him, and I was done with everything that reminded me of him. I started therapy to help me process the trauma of what had happened, but it was slow going. Every time I thought about Alex, I felt a mix of anger, sadness, and betrayal. I had loved him for years, and now I didn't know who he was anymore. Danny was also struggling. She quit her job and moved in with her parents full-time. She was in therapy as well, but like me, she was still trying to make sense of what had happened. Despite everything, Danny and I became close during this time. We leaned on each other for support, and I found comfort in knowing that we were both going through the same thing. Meanwhile, the legal process was moving slowly. The police had collected the videos from that night, and all three men were facing charges. Marcus wasn't being charged for attacking Jeb and the other man during the assault, but he was still dealing with the emotional fallout from the incident. He had confessed to me that he felt responsible for what had happened to Danny because he had convinced her to stay that extra night. I didn't know how to feel about Marcus. On one hand, he had saved Danny from the assault and had been the one to tell me the truth about what happened. But on the other hand, he had kept so much from me. He hadn't told me about the cheating, and he hadn't told me the full extent of Alex's involvement in the assault. I felt like Marcus had betrayed me too, and that made it hard for me to forgive him. I knew he was struggling with his own guilt, but that didn't make it any easier for me to let go of my anger. After a few weeks, I decided that I needed to take a step back from everyone involved in the incident. I told Daniel that I needed space, and he respected my decision. He had been nothing but supportive throughout the whole ordeal, but I needed time to process everything on my own. I also told Marcus that I didn't want to see him for a while. He was devastated, but he understood. He told me that he would be there for me whenever I was ready to talk, but I needed time to heal. my best friend, and my family were my biggest sources of support during this time. They encouraged me to cut ties with everyone from Alex's friend group and focus on moving forward with my life. It wasn't easy, but I knew they were right. As much as I cared about Danny and Daniel, being around them reminded me too much of what had happened. I needed a clean break if I was ever going to heal. It's been a few months now since the incident, and things are starting to get better. Danny and I still talk every day, and she's become one of my closest friends. She's still struggling, but she's incredibly strong, and I know she's going to get through this. I've blocked Alex from contacting me, and I haven't heard from him since I received a letter from him a few weeks ago. In the letter, he tried to explain himself, claiming that he had been pressured into cheating and that he had been drunk and on drugs during the assault. But his excuses meant nothing to me. He had betrayed me in the worst way possible, and there was no going back from that. As for Marcus, I'm still working through my feelings. I know he didn't mean to hurt me, but I can't shake the feeling of betrayal. I'm not sure if I'll ever be able to fully forgive him, but I'm hoping that with time, I'll be able to let go of my anger and move on. The road to healing has been long and difficult, but I'm starting to see the light at the end of the tunnel. I'm grateful for the support of my friends and family, and I'm hopeful that one day I'll be able to move on from this and find happiness again. For now, I'm taking things one day at a time. I'm focusing on myself, on healing, and on rebuilding my life. And while I still have moments of anger and sadness, I know that I'm strong enough to get through this. The wedding may have been canceled, but my future is still bright. I'm not defined by what happened, and I refuse to let it hold me back. This whole experience has taught me a lot about myself and about the people in my life. I've learned who I can trust and who I can't, and I've learned the importance of standing up for myself and my values. It's been a painful journey, but I'm coming out the other side stronger and more resilient. I know that I have a long road ahead of me, but I'm ready to face whatever comes my way. No matter what happens with Alex, Marcus, or anyone else, I know that I'm going to be okay. I have the support of the people who truly care about me, and I have the strength to rebuild my life on my own terms. The past few months have been the hardest of my life, but they've also been a turning point. I'm no longer the person I was before, but I'm proud of the person I'm becoming. And for the first time in a long time, I'm excited about the future.